Hey everyone, welcome to our third multiplayer live session. This one's all about prototyping. My name is Josh Dunsterville. We're going to try something a little bit different. Thomas Lowry is with me. We turned off our video cameras. We're going to see if we can get a little bit better quality of a stream by doing that. So welcome everyone. These are our Figma live streams. We started doing them 3 weeks ago. We've done one on components. We've done one on kind of a Figma 101, kind of getting started. And then this one's all about prototyping. We're going to continue doing these, hopefully on a weekly basis. So if you have certain topics you'd like us to cover, definitely let us know on Twitter. If you're new to Figma, you just stumbled across this channel somehow or clicked a link on Twitter, Figma is a collaborative design tool that's built in a browser. You can find us at figma.com. You can see the site here. It's completely free to sign up. Pretty much all of our features are free. And then if you are working with a team, we do have some team plans available, all the way from small teams all the way up to enterprise. So definitely check us out. Hopefully, if you are joining us, though, you do have a Figma account. So like I said, my name's Josh. I am the community manager at Figma, so I manage most of our Spectrum and Twitter account. So if you've interacted with us on those accounts, you've most likely interacted with me. And then I'm joined by Tom.
Hey all, I'm Tom Lowry. I'm a designer advocate at Figma. My background prior to joining Figma, which was just last August, is also in design. And yeah, hopefully we'll have a good live session today and take you through some of the prototyping basics, everything from creating click-throughs, scrolling frames, sticky headers, modals, hamburger menus, tooltips, drop-downs, presentations, time delays, all sorts of stuff that we'll cover if you're new to Figma.
Yeah, so hopefully you'll see Figma open now on the screen. So like Tom said, we're going to go over prototyping. Within Figma, you kind of have these three different modes that you'll find in the right-hand panel. So you have design panel, prototyping, and then code, which is for developer handoff. So design, if you're coming from Sketch or Adobe XD or any other tool, you should be familiar with this. You have your canvas here. You can draw out shapes, and then this changes based on what you have selected. So we're going to focus primarily in the prototyping panel here. So first, just to cover some basics, for prototyping mode to work, you do need to insert a frame. Frames in Figma are similar to artboards. However, they do have a few different properties. They have constraints so that you can resize things, so all the child elements within the frame. To insert a frame, you can just click the A on your keyboard, or you can go up to this tool in the top right. Sorry, F is the keyboard shortcut. I think A works as well, though. I think I'm used to that one. Anyways, with a frame, you do have, in the design panel, you have some different presets that you can use. iPhone 8, iPhone X, 10. You have desktop, even some printing sizes and social posts. So if I choose iPhone 8 here, and then go back to the prototyping mode, and then select the canvas. So these are kind of the basic settings, but if you select the canvas, you'll see that we have some settings here. So we have device. Depending on the frame size, this should auto select the correct size. So we have iPhone 8 here. You have models, so you can actually kind of change the color here from silver, space gray. You have this little preview mode to show you what the prototype's going to look like. And then you can even change the background color. So you can change that to this nice red here. So starting frame, we're just going to select this main frame. So now if we were to present this to go into prototyping mode, you'll see we have this blank white screen here. It's presented within the iPhone 8, space gray, and you've got that background color. So that's kind of the basics. You can see if I change this to gold, and then go back to the prototyping tab, you'll see that changes in real time. So that's something that's unique with Figma, is that our editor and our prototyping mode are connected. So anything I change in the canvas, if I draw out a rectangle here, it will change in real time within the prototyping mode. So those are kind of the basic settings. Obviously, with a prototype, you're most likely not just going to have one screen. You're going to have multiple things that you're connecting up. So actually, real quick before I jump into the triggers, you'll notice that if I choose another frame here, like desktop, let me delete this. You can change this to like custom size. And then if I go back into the prototyping mode, oops, need to select this as the starting frame. Should update here. Oh, sorry, I chose custom size. I meant to choose none. There you go. So now you see that full size. You do have the options here to change hotspots, we'll get to, but you can change how this is displayed. So 100% display at full size, fit, scale down to fit. So depending on your screen size, it will make sure you can see the whole frame within view. And then you have fill, you can scale down or up to fill the whole screen, or width to scale down to fit the width. So those are options, and if you're in the browser, you would actually see the URL change slightly. So if you were to share this prototype out to somebody, depending on whichever setting you have here, you can change that and then copy the link, and the user that opens that link will be at that same kind of view setting. So just keep that in mind as you prototype things out. So I'm just going to jump to a different page here and go over triggers. So I've already have this set up right now. I have a frame here. You can see that this is the starting frame, which you'll see this little like play button there. And then I've just created 3 kind of buttons here. So on click, the way that you actually connect a prototype is quite simple. I'm going to delete this real quick. When you're in the prototyping mode and you have something selected, whether that's a frame or individual element on your within your frame, you'll see this little blue circle that you can grab, and then you'll see the noodle that pops out, and I'm just going to connect that to this blue screen on click. So over here in the prototyping panel, when you do that, you have different settings that you can go. So on click is probably going to be the default. When you're using an iPhone screen size frame, it actually will change to on tap, but it's the same kind of general idea. This one's connected while hovering, so as I hover over this button, it will present this screen, and when you hover out, it doesn't present it. And then while pressing, so only when I have my mouse clicked down on this button will it present this. So we're gonna go ahead and present this. I'm going to actually scale down to fit just so that you can see all of these. So on click, if I click this, you'll see that now I'm at that blue screen. I'm just using the arrow keys to go back. If I hover over this purple button, you'll see it shows that. I hover off, it disappears. And then while pressing, there's no hover element, obviously, but if I click and hold, it will show that. So you can imagine these different things. So hovering might be good for drop downs, and I think Tom's going to show a little bit about that. While pressing, if you needed to show something while you're maybe dragging an element across the screen while you kind of click and hold. So you can use this to prototype different things. One
thing that I was just gonna
go ahead.
One thing that I was just gonna add, Josh, too, is the same concepts that apply within the editor when you have multiple people working in a file also carry over to the prototype. So Josh and I are viewing the exact same prototype right now. And Josh, I don't know if you want to interact with the prototype just on those 3 buttons that you made. I can actually observe Josh. So if I send this URL to somebody and I just want to watch how they're interacting with the prototype, I'm going to go into observation mode for Josh. And now I can actually watch what Josh is doing.
Oh, do you want me to show your screen? Sorry.
Yeah, you can. Here, I'll launch the prototype. You can share my screen.
Yep.
So I'm launching the same prototype that Josh is in. And if I click on Josh, you'll see that I'm not interacting with the prototype. But if Josh interacts with those different things, I'm actually just watching exactly what he's doing. So you can sort of like remotely observe how someone's using the prototype.
Yeah, so you can imagine this is a great use case for some user testing. User testing is definitely something that we want to kind of improve on, and our prototyping team is, thinking a lot about that use case. And so, yeah, if you do have any ideas or needs about that, be sure to reach out to our support team. Actually, let me show that real quick. So within the canvas, you can there's this little question mark in the bottom right, help and resources. If you click that and click get help, and then you go over to ask, and then how can we help? There's a little drop down, and you can actually submit your feature requests. So this is the best place to kind of let our product teams know what you'd like as new features. So just click that, fill out, be as descriptive as possible, and we'll be sure to take a look at that. So yeah, so jumping back into the prototype, these are probably the three triggers that you'll use most often. Yeah, I think that you obviously do have some other ones here. So while hovering, or sorry, mouse enter, mouse leave, mouse down, mouse up, and then delay. We're actually going to show that in a later example. So I have these three connections. You'll see if I move these frames around, they stay connected. If I go to the design mode here, they disappear just so that I can continue working. They don't get in the way. If I jump back to prototype, you'll see those connections come back up. You can obviously move these arrows and reconnect them to different frames. If you were to like duplicate an object, it actually keeps that same thing. So if I were to duplicate this button here, you'll see that now there's two buttons that both click through to the same frame. So you can kind of improve your workflow by using Option Drag to do that, or Command D to duplicate your elements. If you needed to remove a connection, all you have to do is select the arrow. You can tell that it's selected when all the other connections kind of fade to the back, so you don't see those anymore. Here it's not selected. If I select it, you'll see that it's the only thing, and then you can just press the delete key. Let's say, for example, you had a bunch of connections and you need to start over. You can actually just right click on the canvas, and then there's an option to remove all connections, and that will remove everything. I'm just going to Command Z to undo that. But yeah, those are the basic triggers for prototyping. I'm going to pass it over. Oh, I've been showing Tom's screen this whole time. Anyways, hopefully you get the idea. I'm going to pass it over to Tom actually to go through scrolling frames.
Cool. So one of the things that you can do in Figma is you can set containing frames on elements within your design. So think of that as almost like an artboard within an artboard, and then you can apply scroll properties to it. So in this particular example, I have a picture up here, which is sort of like maybe some sort of hero. And then I have all of these thumbnails here. And then maybe I'm thinking of this as like a scrolling carousel. So one of the things to keep in mind here is that all of these elements are actually nested all within this iPhone 8 frame. But you'll see here, there's a little feature called clip content. And when that's unchecked, it's going to show me things that sort of lie or overflow outside the bounds. If I check this, you're going to see I can no longer see those things that sort of like exist outside the frame. So I'm just going to uncheck it again for 1 second, and I'm going to select all of these things that I want to scroll, and I'm going to do Command Alt G, and that will put them in a frame. You can also use Command G, and at any given point, you can actually just toggle this to be a frame instead of a group. And then what you'll see is that now the frame fits all of the content, and this whole frame actually exceeds the parent frame. But what you can do is you can actually set all of these things up to have constraints so that they don't resize when you resize the frame. So I'm going to anchor them to the top left by default. And then when I resize this frame, like maybe back to where I want this carousel to be on the edge of the frame, you can see that all it's doing is cropping those things that fall outside. Once you've done that, when you go into your prototyping tab with the top level frame selected, you can select the overflow behavior. So I'm going to set this to horizontal scrolling. And what that'll allow me to do when I preview the prototype in the prototype viewer is to actually scroll through that carousel. So it has no effect on the parent thing. I'm just scrolling within that one area. Now, when you get into things like something where you want to go in multiple directions, you can do that too. So flipping over to our other example, what I basically have here is a frame. And inside this frame, I actually have a screenshot of a map. You can see how big it is. If you ever want to see sort of like where things lie, you can also hit Command Y, which will take you into outline mode. And that'll just show the outlines of objects that you may not be able to see. And so all I've done is on this top level frame from that same overflow behavior drop down, I've selected horizontal and scrolling, horizontal and vertical scrolling. So if we preview this one, you're going to get a very similar thing. So instead of being able to navigate side to side, you can go back and forth like this. Now, one other thing that I want to highlight in the next example is sticky headers and sticky footers. And I'm going to come back to the scrolling frame to highlight one more thing that you can do. So by default, when we make a canvas or like an artboard or a frame, whatever you want to call it, when we place them on the canvas like Josh was showing by pressing F and choosing one of these device sizes, it always gives you the full device size. So we don't really know whether or not you want to scroll content unless you resize the device. So what I've done here is I've also got a nav bar and I've got this header status bar. So what I can do is I've set the constraints to be left, right, and top. And on the bottom one, I've set the resizing constraints to be left, right, and bottom. And there's a checkbox on both of these that you can check called fix position when scrolling. So if I check those off, you'll see in the layers panel, it moves the fixed elements to the top and then the scroll elements to the bottom. So you can see which elements in your layer stack are going to be fixed when you're scrolling. And then when I preview this, what you'll see is that I actually can't scroll. And the reason for that is that you have to resize your parent frame to show all of the content. So if we scale this down like this so that it fits all of the content, and then we go back to the prototype, you'll now notice that the status bar stays fixed, the nav bar stays at the bottom. Now we can scroll through that content. One thing that you can also do is some users want to still get a sense of whether or not what the device is going to look like in sort of like an unscrolled state with the nav bar. So a little trick that you can do is you could take these items outside and we could resize this back down to our Android device here. And we could turn this into a component. So now we have a component called photos. And I'm just going to select all of the photos and set the resizing constraints to be left, right, and top. And I'm going to put an instance of it on the within our device. Now the device is still set to scroll, but it's not going to scroll because I haven't made this frame tall enough to encapsulate all the content. But one trick that you can do is you can set this to clip content on your master component. And then on this device, you can actually scale this down. So we could scale it like that. And then when we click on the master component, we can set the overflow behavior, so vertical scrolling. And then when we browse through this, we can still get that same scrolling effect, but you still have sort of like an expanded version of the content, and you have a view of what the design is going to look like in the device with all of your nav bars and status bars intact, like at the device size. So of course, because this is a component, any modifications that we make here are going to show up here. So it's just one of the little workflow hacks that may help you out. Now, going back to, now that we've talked about sticky headers and scrolling frames, going back to this previous example that I showed you with the vertical and horizontal, You'll also notice that within frames, you can also have sticky elements. So within this frame, I want this floating action button to be anchored to the bottom right. So like if I was to resize this up, you can see it always stays to the bottom. And when we preview the prototype, you may have noticed that that thing stays in place as well. So just something to keep in mind, that you can have sticky elements within frames with scrolling properties that are nested within your overall device size. So hopefully that that helps. Over to you, Josh, for modals.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so I'm gonna now show off probably a pretty common interaction that you would want to do in a prototype is a modal. And this is going to introduce our overlay feature that we launched sometime last year. But so here I have this simple iPhone screen here. We've got some photos, and then we have a button here at the bottom to delete all photos. You can see this little modal frame that I've set up. You've got your kind of standard alert that's in iOS. And then we have the photo screen, same photo screen that we have, but with all the items deleted and a little kind of stale state there. So to do this, we're first going to connect this button up to this modal. And then in the properties panel here, we want this to be on tap. So when you tap that button, we want it to go to the delete modal. But the way we want to present this, instead of navigate, if we keep this at navigate actually right now, you'll see what happens. If I click this button, it's just going to do this. So it goes to that frame, but it's in the top left. Obviously, this is not what we want it to look like. So what we want instead is this open overlay. So this is on the right option. When you click that button, you have some additional options that you can select. So we're going to keep this default to centered. You can position manually. We'll get into that. And then you get an overlay background. So I'm going to actually turn this on. So this is going to create a black overlay layer, and it's going to be at 25%. You have the option to close when clicking outside. In this case, we actually want the cancel button to do that. So first, let's just see what this looks like now. So if I go back to my prototyping demo, I click delete all photos. You can see this faded, or this put a black layer on top of it at 25%, and it displays this now centered. Let's say you want it to be a little darker, so I'm going to jump this up to maybe 65%. You'll see now that it's much darker there. But nothing happens. Now I can't click cancel, I can't click delete, because right now I just have one connection. So if I go back here and select the cancel button, I'm actually going to take it back to this screen. Or actually, let me delete that connection, sorry. You actually have this action that is close overlay. So instead of needing to go back, because there could be a case where you have this overlay appearing on multiple screens, and if you needed to connect it back to each individual screen, that would take a long time. So we just have close overlay, so I'm going to do that. You see it has this little connection to an X. So now if I go to prototyping and I click cancel, it goes back to the screen, it closes that overlay. Now you have that. So now we just need to connect this delete button. So we're going to grab this. Oh, this thing's getting in my way. Zoom in here a bit. There we go. And we're just going to go to this screen here. The transition, I think, is instant. I think that makes the most sense because it's the same screen. It's not presenting like another modal or pushing or anything like that. So this should now work as expected. So we go here, delete all photos. We now click delete, and now all the photos are gone. So that's a simple modal. Trying to think if I'm forgetting anything. So you do have, so let's say you also wanted to then allow the user to click anywhere outside of this modal. So what I showed you there. So if I click this, close when clicking outside. So all you need to do is check that box. And so now if I were to go back and I click delete photos, I can click cancel, or I can click anywhere outside. Yeah, so, and then you can imagine if we had multiple screens here, the reason why we wanted to do that um, close overlay button is if we had instead connected this cancel button to this screen and we have another photo view and we want this delete button to go to the same modal. Now if I present here, I'll just change this image here just so that you can, let's go solid, just so you can see this is a different screen. Prototype, and we're actually going to just move this play button down here. And now if I go to this prototyping demo and I click delete all photos and cancel, it stays on this screen. So definitely use that to your advantage. It's great at, you know, like I said, if you option drag and or command D to duplicate a bunch of screens, I only need one modal frame to hook that up. The next action is creating a hamburger menu. So this is a pretty common kind of navigation flow. We have another kind of screen here. We have the hamburger button up in the top left. And that hamburger button is persistent across these three different screens. So this is also going to use an overlay. And all we need to do is select this button here. It's got a nice frame outside of it. And then we're going to connect it with our hamburger menu over here on the left. We're going to change this to overlay. And you can see that it's actually pretty smart because this this frame here is the same standard size as the default frame, the phone size. It guesses that you want to position this from the top left instead of centered like our other one. So with that there, if I were to play this prototype and click here, you'll see that this now pops up. Doesn't look the best at the moment. I think this is because we need to turn on scrolling for this frame. So overflow, vertical scrolling. Let's do the same for these. So now presenting, there we go, that's scrollable content. Nothing else happens. We need to connect some more things up. So X here, we're going to actually do the same thing. We're going to choose action and then close overlay. And this is because we want to be able to close this overlay across all these different screens. So let's connect these and do the same thing. Let's turn on the background color here too. Okay, so that's good. And then we've got one more here. That one's not quite centered. You can see as you zoom out, the handle still stays persistent on your screen, so you can drag it to a screen, you know, down here on your canvas, and you're still able to drag it. Okay, so now we have the hamburger menu connected there, but we have no way to navigate. So if I connect this to the new file screen, we have notifications to the notifications and then images here. So now if we present, we should be able to close that. We can open this out. If I go to notifications, it goes to the notification screen. I can navigate to images, back to new files. So that's nice. Right now it's just appearing though. And typically hamburger menus kind of slide out. So we do have some options for transitions. So if I go back here, right now the transition is instant. If we want it to instead move in, let's see here, if that's selected to the left, that's going to move in all the way from the left side, so that's not what we want. If we want it to come in from the right, let's try this. There we go. So now that feels much more native, I guess. You have the scrollable content. You can still kind of go through. Obviously, it disappears as you click out. You can also do like an ease in and out. You can set the duration there. Yeah. Was there anything else on this, Tom, that I'm missing? Oh, did I lose Tom?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Sorry. If you go back to the prototype viewer, I added a device frame too, which will just
oh,
add a little bit more context with the.
perfect. So let me drop down to scale down to fit here. Awesome. So yeah, this now looks much nicer. You've got the kind of ease in, ease out. I can navigate to images from here. I can navigate to notifications. Um, so yeah, that's another common use case of the modal. So yeah, Tom, if you want to go over how to use tooltips.
Cool. Hopefully my screen's sharing.
Yep.
So another thing that you can do is you can set manually positioned overlays, and this will give you like a little indicator as to where you want to position them. And so on the screen, what I'm going to do is I've got this very happy person here, and let's just say we want to add a tooltip. When you click on it, that's going to allow us to delete this photo um, from this sequence of images. So we want to basically go from here to here. So just like we've done in the past, we can create a link between um, this image and then this frame outside, which is our tooltip. And so we can set that to be an overlay. And from this drop down, you have a bunch of position options, as Josh showed you. But if you choose manual, what you'll get is this ghosted, just low res preview of what the tooltip looks like. And so now you can position that wherever you want it. And in the case of a tooltip, we don't want an overlay background, so we have it turned off. And so then when we launch this tooltip, we obviously want to link delete image to the version of our screen that has the image removed. So we can make that connection, and that's just going to be a standard navigate connection. But one thing that we want to do is make sure that this checkbox is set. This will preserve the scroll position so it feels a little bit natural. That way, when we click delete image, it's not going to jump back to the top, and then we have to scroll all the way down to see if the image is removed, just like it would be in real life. So if we keep that checked and we preview the prototype, you'll see that we can scroll down and we can click on this. And one of the neat things about the overlay, when it's in manual position, it's always relative to whatever image that you've linked it. So now that I've launched it, I can still keep scrolling, and that tooltip is going to stay anchored to that. And then when we click delete image, it reverts back to the version without, and it didn't jump us back all the way to the top. So that's an example of a manual position. Of course, this is a more of a mobile example. If we go down here to a drop-down version, we can do something very similar if you're building desktop comps, and we can link this here. We can set this to be an overlay again, specify the manual positioning. And so I want it right below my drop down. And then we can say maybe we want it to have like a quick dissolve. If you click outside, it's going to get closed. And then we could even link these menu items to other screens in the page. But when we preview it, you'll see that when we click on it, it shows up. And you could even set that to be a hover state if you wanted. So pretty easy to create things like drop downs when you need them. The next example I'm going to show you with the overlays is how you can swap between two different states of overlays if you want to have like an interaction that happens within your overlay. So right here, basically what we want to build is we want to share these photos, and then we want to pick a destination. And in this particular case, we want the destination to be one of our, we want it to be Jane, who's we're going to share through AirDrop. Now, in the original bottom sheet that we're going to bring up, the AirDrop is disabled. So what we want to do is link to this version, which is going to be the enabled version. So what we do is we can click on our button, and we can link that to our sheet, and we're going to trigger that to open as an overlay. And in this case, we want it to be bottom center. And if we want there to be a scrim behind it, we can toggle this on. And then once you're in here, what we're going to do is we're going to link from this toggle to this second version of the sheet with AirDrop on. Now, the difference here is that instead of this being a navigate connection, what we're going to do is we're going to set it to a swap. And what that's going to do is when you click this, it's actually going to swap this overlay for this overlay. And then we can have an interaction from here, which is just like your standard navigation connection, which is going to take you here. So maybe on this little interaction, do this one here, maybe we'll just have a little dissolve, and then when we'll make sure that our device has a device frame. Let's just say it's an iPhone 8, and we'll preview it. And so now you can see here, we click on this, it launches our overlay. When we click here, it swaps to this version of the overlay. And then when we click here, it brings us to our target destination that tells us that we've successfully shared the photos to Jane. Do you want to do the next one, Josh?
Sure. Sorry, going to my screen here. So multiple overlays. Actually, if you want to take this one, that'd be great. Sorry.
Sure, no worries. So basically with the multiple overlays, it works basically the same way that we just did, but instead of doing a swap, we can open up an overlay within an overlay. So in this case, we would draw this link to this thing that we're going to open up as a bottom sheet. We're going to set it again to be bottom center. Maybe this time we'll add an animation coming up from the bottom. And then we want to emulate what it's going to look like when you buy the small version of the sprint. So we're going to link it to this overlay. We're going to have that open up as an overlay. It's going to be centered on the screen. Maybe for this one, we'll have the scrim. And then when you buy it, it's going to take us to the screen. So when we preview it, here, let me add a device frame just so it looks a little bit more real. And I'm just going to scale this to fit. There's your sheet that comes up. We can choose buy. It's going to show the overlay on top of the overlay, and then we can have an interaction from that takes you all the way to order prints. The other thing that we can do, I've got an example wired up here. When you start like linking all of these things together, is you can also add time delays. So if you wanted to sort of like simulate something, this is kind of like an odd example, but I just thought I'd show it to you because we do get questions like this from time to time, how you might be able to do something like this. So in this example, let's just pretend there's a form up here. And during this form submission, I want the button to change to show like some progress. And then it's going to show me success, and it's going to take me to a destination. So in this case, what I'm actually doing is stitching together all the things that we've done before, where I'm opening this as an overlay with a manual position. So it's going to position this progress bar over my button. And then for each of these interactions, you can see they're all linked in sequence here. What I've done is instead of the interaction being like a tap or a click, it's just a delay. And so when you select the delay, you can set how many milliseconds it's going to be. And so it's going to transition from this one to this one to this one. And then when it gets to the success one, just to sort of emulate that there's a slight delay as things get, let's just say, saved to the server, then we can go here. You could do the same thing with like a skeleton loader or something like that. Lots of different use cases. But basically after that and last delay, it's going to take you here. So when we preview this, what you're going to get is something that looks like this. And when we click submit, it's going to show us the progress bar, then the success message, and then it's going to take us to our last destination frame.
Awesome.
If you want to take the presentation one, Josh, go for it.
Yeah. So this question actually came up on Twitter, I think the other day. Somebody asked if people use Figma to do their presentations, and we actually use Figma for all of our internal presentations. So whenever we have a meeting, we use it as our kind of tool for slides. So obviously there are some limitations. This is something we're exploring though in the future of kind of adding some more features around the presentation mode. But obviously you don't have kind of the animations that you could get from Keynote or even Google Slides. But yeah, so here's just a quick example that Tom put together. You have a bunch of different frames. The nice thing is that if I was to just select this and present it, and then we're going to actually fit to scale this down for now. If I don't do any connections, I actually have the ability to click through. So I'm just going to use my arrow keys and I can click through section 1, slide 1, 2, 3. And it's just going to go based on the kind of order that you lay it out in your canvas, which is great. Obviously, you can uh, connect it and then make this whole thing clickable, and you can click through. But when you're presenting, you may have your computer off to the side and you're sharing it on a projector or another screen, and you can just use either a wireless keyboard to kind of go through this presentation. So that's nice. And then with the presentation mode, actually, we do have the option within prototypes, and I don't know if we were planning on covering this, but let's say you have a URL that you want to go to maybe show a YouTube video. Within, how do you set that up? Action, here we go, open URL. So within that, I can now take this to figma.com. And then if I go back to the prototype and I go to slide 1, this is actually clickable. Should bring up Safari here, and it's going to go into my files here because I'm logged in. But if I was logged out, it would take you to here. But yeah, that's a great way if you do have kind of external links that you want to connect. You do have the option to go out to a URL. But yeah, that's the simple slides. A great way too, this using our smart selection feature is a great way to kind of organize your slides. So, maybe if I want to select all of these frames here, I'm going to put them in a grid that tidies them up, and then I can actually, expand them out, give myself a little bit more room. Or if I needed to swap, let's say I have these, and I wanted to swap this, slide 3 will show, it should move that within the layers. And then if I go to my prototype, let's jump down to section 3, you should see slide 3 first. Yep.
Yeah, so there's a bit of stuff going on behind the scenes that when you don't have those prototype links, we sort of use a left to right, top to bottom type thing that you can use to order the slides in a visual way that makes sense.
Cool. I know there was a question in the chat around using components, and maybe Tom, you can show that. But if anyone does have any other questions or examples that you'd like us to run through, we do have a few more minutes left, and we can definitely do that. Just let us know.
Yeah,
in the
I just
chat.
built, if you want to flip over to my screen, I just built an example to show you how components work in prototyping mode as well.
Yep, you are on.
Cool. So basically what I've got here is I've got 3 destination screens, and then I've got a bottom nav here. I've turned the bottom nav into a component, but I haven't made any of these connections yet. So what I can do is I could actually put this bottom nav on all of the other screens. And on the master component, what I can do is link all these screens. So I'm going to link them to their respective screens. And what you can see is now when we deselect, because we've made the connections in the master component, they all get updated so that you don't have to go through. If this was to change destinations to go to a different screen, you now don't have to go through each instance and change the component or make those connections manually. It all happens. You'll also notice here that I've got a back button, which is going to take you to the previous screen. And what's nice about this is also a component, and we have a back feature which will contextually go to the previous screen that you came from. So if we select this master component and under action, we choose back, you'll see that now each of these instances have a back action that propagates through all of them. So if we were to preview this prototype, this is going to take you to 1, this will take you to 2, this will take you to 3, and this one is always going to take you to the previous screen. So hopefully that it helps a little bit. One of the things to keep in mind is these connections are always made from master components. So if you have like a navbar component that you're bringing in from your design system, you obviously won't have the ability to make those master connections to other pages because the master component might live in another file. So one of the things that you can always do is wrap that master component as a new master, or wrap that component instance in a new master component and then create all the connections, and then use instances of that component across all your artboards. That way sort of you can preserve those links across all of the different screens. Now, one thing that I'll also just want to highlight here, because one of the things that you'll find is really handy is, let's just say I bring in a component that I want to link. So let's just say it's like a nav bar like this. Because with Figma components, you can access all of the individual layers within each instance. In a lot of other tools, symbols are like flat objects on your canvas, and you can't access all of the elements within it. Because you can in Figma, you could actually deep click into these things and link elements within your components to other screens. So just keep that in mind. It's really powerful, and it prevents you from having to draw like transparent hotspots over things that you want to link to.
Awesome. Yeah, and then one thing that's a little hard to demonstrate, I guess, through the live stream, but we do have a Figma Mirror app. And I actually was just pulling this up on my phone to test it now. But in this demo that Tom put together, if you were to connect your account and you have the phone, it's the same size, and you just open up that same frame, you'll actually be able to kind of tap through and actually test your prototype on an actual device, which is nice. But yeah, that's all that we had. I'm just checking questions here in the chat. Using strung up delays like the progress bar, could we make mini GIFs? I guess technically, yeah.
Yeah, you could simulate an animation by doing that. The only thing we don't have the ability just yet is to give you the ability to like export it as a GIF. But like if you just wanted to simulate a little interaction or something, that you could. The other thing, it's hard for me to show because I'm just sharing my my Figma screen right now, is if you're doing, this is sort of like a hack, but basically if you open up your design in the Mirror app, especially in the browser, which I believe is just figma.com/mirror, Josh?
I guess so. I actually don't know this one.
Figma.com/mirror, mirror.figma.com. You could actually log into the same file twice and look at this at like 100% size. So basically you could have two browser windows open and use the mirror to basically view what you're designing at two different scales. So basically, if I had this zoomed in really close at a really detailed level, I could actually be viewing it at 100% in the Mirror app, just when you're doing like fine detail. Nothing related to prototyping, but it's like sort of a cool design workflow thing that will allow you to visualize the thing that you're designing at two different scales using the prototyping features.
That's fascinating. I actually did not know that. Awesome. So the last thing, let me jump over to my screen here. The last thing I just kind of wanted to show is where you can find some more resources. So if you scroll down to our site, go to figma.com and go down to the bottom, we have this kind of resource section here. So we have a resource hub. Here is our support help center. And then we have search here. So if you wanted to know more about prototyping, just start typing that out, creating prototypes. And then our support team has actually put together a bunch of pre-recorded videos. You can find these all on our YouTube page. But if for some reason we missed something or you need kind of a deeper explanation, this is a great way or a great place to check out. So be sure to look there. And then lastly, Tom and I are both on Twitter pretty much every day. So feel free to connect with us there. If you have any further questions, you can ask there. And then our Spectrum community, which is just at spectrum.chat/Figma. You can check that out as well. But yeah, that's all we had for today. So thank you so much for joining, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy Figma Friday.